Ethan stood at the edge of the grand hall, his eyes scanning the room filled with noble faces, bright banners, and the low hum of voices. He was only a soldier, assigned to guard the royal delegation. But the moment he saw Princess Claire step into the hall, everything else faded. She walked with calm grace, her gown trailing behind her, her smile reserved yet warm enough to quiet the restless crowd. Ethan's chest tightened as he watched her, though he quickly looked away. She was far above him, and he was nothing more than a protector in the background. Throughout the evening, Ethan kept his post, his hand near his weapon, his eyes moving carefully across the hall. Yet no matter how hard he tried, his gaze kept drifting back to Claire. She spoke softly with her advisors, laughed gently at the words of a young nobleman, and carried herself with a strength that drew people to her. Ethan had seen battles, storms, and hardships, but he had never seen someone who made him forget the weight of the world. As the night stretched on, a small moment changed everything. Claire broke away from the crowd and moved near the balcony, her eyes gazing at the stars above. Ethan was stationed nearby, standing stiff and silent. She noticed him, and for a brief moment their eyes met. Ethan felt his heart pound, and he quickly bowed his head, embarrassed to be caught staring. But instead of turning away, Claire gave him a slight nod, a small sign of acknowledgement that felt far larger than it should have. Later, when the hall grew quieter and the crowd began to thin, Claire approached the balcony again. Ethan remained close, keeping his position. This time Claire spoke. "You are from Earth, aren't you?" she asked, her voice calm. Ethan hesitated, surprised that she would speak to him directly. "Yes, Your Highness," he replied. "My family is from a small town near the coast." Claire tilted her head, her eyes curious. "Is it like Earth, I mean? I have read about it, but the stories never capture what it truly feels like." Ethan swallowed, his hands tightening at his sides. "It's simple," he said. "The air smells like salt near the ocean, and the fields stretch wide and green. People wake up early to work, and at night they gather on porches and tell stories. It's not grand, but it feels alive." Claire's lips curved into a faint smile. "Alive, I like that." She turned her gaze back to the stars. "Sometimes I think the halls of the palace are too quiet, too polished. Your Earth sounds honest." Ethan nodded, unsure of what else to say. He felt both nervous and strangely at ease, as if speaking to her was something natural. Still, he kept his answer short. She was the princess, and he was just a soldier. Their worlds were not meant to cross. Before she walked away, Claire glanced back at him once more. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "Perhaps one day I will see it for myself." Then she was gone, her gown trailing behind her as she returned to her people. Ethan stood frozen, his heart racing. God, he knew he should push the feeling aside, bury it deep where no one could see. But no matter how much he tried, he could not forget the way she looked at him, as if for a brief moment he was not invisible. The night ended, and Ethan returned to his quarters, but sleep never came. He kept replaying the moment on the balcony, the sound of her voice, the light in her eyes. It was foolish, he told himself. He was sworn to protect her, not to dream of her. Yet as dawn approached, a whisper slipped from his lips, a truth he could not deny even to himself. "I wish I could marry her," he murmured into the silence. And though no one else heard, the thought burned deep within him, refusing to fade. Ethan tried to focus on his duties in the days that followed, but his mind often drifted to the balcony and the way Princess Claire had spoken to him. He told himself to forget it, to bury the memory, yet it returned again and again. When he stood guard in the corridors, when he patrolled the palace gardens, when he closed his eyes at night, her voice lingered. It was not the words themselves, but the way she had looked at him, as if his answers mattered. Princess Claire was busy with endless duties, meetings with advisors, audiences with nobles, ceremonies that demanded her presence. But even with all that weight upon her, she seemed to find small moments where her path crossed with Ethan's. Sometimes it was a glance as she passed by with her guards. Sometimes it was a quiet word of thanks when he opened a door for her. And sometimes, when the palace felt less crowded, she stopped to ask about Earth again. One afternoon, Claire found Ethan standing by the training grounds. The sun was high, and soldiers were sparring, their swords clashing in steady rhythm. Claire stepped closer, watching for a moment before she spoke. "Do you train with them as well?" she asked. Ethan nodded. Yes, Your Highness. Every morning before the day begins, Claire's eyes followed the soldiers. It looks hard, it is, Ethan admitted. It keeps us ready. He hesitated, then added, back on Earth, boys in the village would practice with sticks. We would fight until our arms grew sore. It was more game than duty back then. Claire turned her gaze to him. And now? Now it is duty, he said. But sometimes I still remember the laughter of those days. It makes the training feel lighter. Claire smiled faintly, and for a moment Ethan forgot the rank that separated them. She was not a princess then, not to him. She was just a young woman listening with real interest. The thought both warmed him and made him uneasy. Over the next weeks, their conversations grew. Claire often asked questions about Earth. She wanted to know about its food, its music, its skies. Ethan told her about bread baked fresh in stone ovens, about songs sung around fires, about storms that rolled in from the sea. He kept his words simple, but she listened with a quiet focus that made him feel his memories mattered. One evening, Claire joined a small group in the gardens. Nobles spoke of alliances and trade, but she seemed restless. When her eyes caught Ethan standing near the gate, she excused herself and walked over. Tell me more about the sea, she said softly, ignoring the whispers of those who noticed her choice. Ethan described the endless water, the waves crashing against the shore, the way children would run to meet the tide. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, as if she could picture it all. She opened them again, she said, It sounds free. Ethan nodded. It feels that way. When you stand there, the world seems larger, but also closer to you. It's a place where people forget their troubles, even for a little while. She was quiet, and he could not tell what she was thinking. But when she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. I wish I could see it one day. Ethan wanted to tell her she would love it, that she belonged there more than in these heavy halls. But he kept those words inside. He was a guard, nothing more. Ow. To speak his true feelings would be to risk everything. The bond between them grew quietly. It was not spoken aloud, but it was there in every look, every shared moment, every small question and answer. The nobles whispered, the advisors frowned, but Claire did not seem to care. She sought him out when she could, and he never turned away. Still, Ethan knew the truth. She was a princess, her life tied to the kingdom and its needs. He was a soldier, his life bound to service. No matter how close they grew, no matter how much he longed for her, there would always be a line between them. And yet, as he watched her walk away that night, the sound of her laughter still in his ears. He wondered if some lines were meant to be crossed. The festival stretched across the capital like fire in the night. Banners hung from tall towers, music filled the air, and the streets glowed with lanterns. People laughed and celebrated, but Ethan's eyes never left the princess. He moved through the crowd with steady steps, his hand near his weapon, scanning every shadow. Claire walked ahead, surrounded by nobles and guards, her presence drawing cheers and bows. Her smile carried light, but Ethan noticed the way her gaze often drifted to the sky, as if she longed for peace beyond the noise. For a while, everything seemed calm. The sound of drums and laughter echoed through the streets, and Claire stopped often to greet her people. Ethan stayed close, but never too close, a silent shield in the background. Yet deep inside, unease stirred. Something in the air felt wrong, too sharp, too still beneath the music. His instincts proved true when the first blast shook the square. Smoke burst from the far end, screams tore through the crowd, and chaos followed. Men with blades and dark cloaks charged forward, their shouts drowning out the music. The festival turned from joy to terror in a single breath. Ethan's body moved before thought. He pushed through panicked citizens, rushing toward Claire. Now, guards scrambled to form a shield around her, but the attackers were too many, their blades cutting through the line. Nobles scattered, some crying out for help, others running without care for anyone else. Claire stood frozen for a moment, her eyes wide, her breath quick, but she did not flee. Stay behind me, Ethan said firmly as he reached her. His voice carried no hesitation, only command. He drew his sword and faced the rushing attackers. The clash of steel rang in his ears as the first enemy struck. Ethan blocked the blow, twisted, and struck back, his blade finding its mark. He fought not for glory but for her, every swing fueled by the thought of keeping her alive. Claire stayed close, her gown torn by the rush of bodies. She could see the blood on Ethan's arm where a blade had cut him, yet he never slowed. Every strike, every movement, he placed himself between her and danger. She had known loyal guards before, men sworn to protect her, but she had never seen such unshaken resolve. More enemies pressed forward. The guards around Claire fell one by one, the crowd scattering. Ethan's breaths grew heavy, his arms aching, but he refused to step back. He fought with the strength of desperation, his wounds stinging, his body screaming. He took another cut along his side, his blood soaking through his uniform. But still he stood. Claire's heart pounded as she watched him. She wanted to cry out, to beg him to retreat, but something inside her held back. She saw the fire in his eyes, the way he faced death without fear, and she knew he would never leave her side. For the first time, she felt not like a princess guarded by duty, but like a woman being fought for with true devotion. At last, the royal soldiers rallied, charging from the side streets and cutting through the attackers. The remaining enemies fled into the night, their cries fading into the distance. Silence fell over the square, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the sobs of the frightened. Ethan staggered, his sword dropping from his hand. His body trembled, blood dripping from his arm and side. Claire reached for him, her hand steady, despite the storm inside her. "You're hurt," she said, her voice shaking. "It doesn't matter," Ethan breathed. "You're safe." Claire looked into his eyes, her chest tightening. No nobleman she had met, no suitor who had spoken words of love or promise had ever shown such truth. Ethan had nearly given his life for her without asking for anything in return. He tried to bow, but his legs weakened. Claire caught his arm, holding him up. "Enough," she whispered.
What?
"You've done more than anyone." Ethan's vision blurred, but even as darkness pressed at the edges, he forced a small smile. "As long as you're safe," he murmured. Then his strength gave way, and he collapsed into her arms. Claire held him tightly, her own gown stained with his blood. And for the first time she felt fear, not for herself, but for the man who had risked everything for her. The palace was quiet after the attack, but fear still lingered in the halls. Servants whispered in corners, guards doubled their patrols, and nobles pressed the king for answers. Yet for Princess Claire, the only thought that consumed her was Ethan. He lay in a chamber set aside for the wounded, his side wrapped in bandages, his arm bound where the blade had struck. Healers worked tirelessly, but his strength returned slowly. Claire visited often, though she tried to keep her presence unnoticed. She would walk in silence, sit beside his bed, and watch his breathing steady. At first, she told herself it was duty, gratitude to the man who had saved her life. But each time she sat in that room, she felt something deeper. She saw not only the soldier who had fought for her, but the man who had whispered words he thought no one would hear. One evening, Claire entered quietly. The chamber was dim, a single lamp flickering against the stone walls. Ethan was awake, his eyes half open, staring at the ceiling as if lost in thought. He turned his head when he heard her steps, and though his body was weak, he tried to sit up. "Stay down," Claire said, moving closer. "You need to rest." He gave a faint smile. "Princess, you should not be here." "Should not," she repeated. "And yet I am." She pulled a chair near his bed and sat down. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched between them until Claire finally asked, "Why did you do it?" Ethan's brow furrowed. "Do what? Throw yourself into danger like that? You were wounded because of me." He shook his head slowly. "I was wounded because it was my duty. A guard protects. That is all." But Claire did not believe him. Not fully. She leaned forward, her voice low. "I heard you, Ethan. That night in your quarters, you whispered it when you thought you were alone." Every muscle in Ethan's body went still. His breath caught and his eyes widened. You heard?" "I did," Claire said softly. "You wished you could marry me." The words hung in the air like a blade between them. Ethan turned his face away, shame burning across him. "Forgive me," he said quickly. "It was foolish. I never meant for anyone to hear. I know my place. I have no right to such thoughts." Claire's heart pounded. torn between the duty she had carried all her life and the truth she had just uncovered. She watched him struggle with the weight of his words, and for the first time she saw not the soldier, not the protector, but the man who had held a secret hope inside him. "You risked your life without hesitation," Claire said, her voice trembling. "Not because of duty alone," she admitted. Ethan closed his eyes. The silence pressed hard, but at last he spoke, his voice raw. "Yes, not only for duty. I love you. I tried to kill it, to bury it, but it is stronger than me. I would rather fall 1,000 times than see you harmed. But that love is a burden, not a gift. It has no place in your world." Claire sat back, her breath unsteady. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Suitors had come with promises of power and gold, nobles with rehearsed words of beauty and charm. But Ethan's confession was simple and true. It struck her deeper than any grand speech. She wanted to answer, but footsteps echoed in the corridor. A guard called out that the council awaited her presence. She stood slowly, her eyes fixed on Ethan. "Rest," she said, though her voice carried more than command. "We will speak again." When she left the chamber, her mind raced. She had always been bound by duty, her future decided by alliances and politics. But now she carried a secret, one that pulled her heart in a direction she had never imagined. The council would demand her obedience, the kingdom would demand her sacrifice, yet in the silence of her own soul, she carried the sound of Ethan's voice, saying the words he thought he should never speak. When for the first time Claire wondered if she would have the strength to choose her own path. The royal council gathered in the great chamber, their voices filling the air with plans and demands. Princess Claire sat at the head beside her father, listening as the men spoke of alliances, treaties, and the marriages that would seal them. Names of noble families were placed before her like tools to be used. Each man offered power, wealth, or armies. Claire nodded politely, but her mind was far away, caught in the memory of Ethan's voice when he confessed his love. When the council ended, she walked slowly through the halls. The words of the advisors followed her, heavy and sharp. One man had spoken of a prince from a far kingdom, another of a wealthy duke whose lands would strengthen their borders. None of it stirred her heart. Instead, she remembered Ethan's pale face as he lay in the healer's chamber. The way his voice broke as he told her his love was a burden. She carried those words like fire inside her. Ethan was recovering, though his wounds still slowed him. He returned to light duty, standing watch in the quieter corners of the palace. When Claire passed, he bowed, his eyes lowered, his expression calm. It was as if nothing had been said, as if he had pushed the truth deep down again. But Claire could see it in the way his hands tightened when she drew near, in the way his gaze lingered when he thought she would not notice. That night, Claire stood in her chamber, staring at the reflection in the mirror. She saw a princess dressed in silk, a daughter of a king, a woman who carried the weight of duty. But beneath that, she saw someone who wanted more than power and arrangement. She wanted truth. She wanted love. She wanted the man who had fought for her with his life. The next day, the court was alive with talk of her future. Servants whispered about who she might choose. Nobles watched her closely, eager to read her decision. Claire walked among them with steady steps, but her mind battled within. Her father trusted her to do what was right for the kingdom. Her people looked to her as a symbol, yet her heart pulled her toward the one choice no one would expect. In the gardens that evening, she found Ethan again, was standing near the fountain, his hand resting on the stone as if lost in thought. She approached, her steps soft against the gravel. He turned at the sound, surprise flickering across his face. "Princess," he said, bowing quickly, "you should not be here alone." "I am not alone," Claire replied. Her voice carried strength, though inside her heart beat fast. She studied him, the soldier who had saved her, the man who had confessed the truth he wished to hide. "The council wishes me to marry," she said at last. Ethan's face hardened. He looked down, his voice quiet. "Of course they do. It is what is expected." "And what do you expect of me?" Claire asked. He hesitated, his hands tightening at his sides. "I expect nothing. You belong to a world I cannot touch. My duty is to serve. Nothing more." Claire stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "But if there were no duty, if there were no throne, what then?" Ethan looked at her as if torn apart inside. His lips parted, but no words came. At last he whispered, "Then I would give you my whole life." But that is a dream, not a choice. She wanted to answer, but voices called from the far end of the garden. Nobles approached, their eyes sharp with suspicion. Claire straightened, her face calm, her secret moment with Ethan buried beneath a mask of grace. She turned away, leaving him standing by the fountain with his heart in silence. That night, in the quiet of her chamber, Claire stood by the window and looked out over the city. Her people slept, unaware of the battle in her heart. She knew the council would press harder, her father would remind her of duty, and every noble in the land would expect her to choose a suitor worthy of the throne. But deep inside, Claire felt the weight of her own choice forming. She could walk the path laid before her, or she could step into the unknown, guided not by duty, but by love. And for the first time, she dared to think of what might happen if she defied them all. The palace seemed calm, but beneath the surface tension ran deep. The council pressed harder, each meeting filled with louder voices and stricter demands. Claire listened in silence as they laid out the benefits of a marriage to a foreign prince, the strength it would bring, the safety it promised. But her thoughts wandered again and again to the man who had risked everything for her. Ethan continued his duties, though he carried himself with more caution now. His wounds were healing, but his heart was burdened with the words Claire had heard. He avoided speaking of it, avoided letting his feelings slip through. When she passed by, he bowed with perfect discipline, his face steady, his voice formal. Only in his eyes did the truth flicker, and Claire saw it every time. One evening, when the halls were quiet and the candles burned low, Claire found Ethan standing alone in the courtyard. The stars stretched above, clear and endless, and he stood gazing at them, as if searching for an answer. She hesitated, her hands trembling at her sides, but then she stepped forward. He turned at the sound of her steps, surprise flashing across his face. "Princess," he said quickly, "should I call for your guard?" "No," Claire said, her voice calm. "Wish to see you." Ethan bowed his head, unsure of what to do. The silence hung heavy until Claire broke it. "Tell me what you feel," she said. Her words were simple, but they struck deep. Ethan froze. "I cannot, Your Highness." "You can," Claire said, stepping closer. "I already know the truth. I want to hear it from your lips." He shook his head, pain in his eyes. "My truth has no place here. It is dangerous. If anyone knew, I am not anyone," Claire interrupted. "I am the one you risked your life for. I am the one you whispered about in the dark. Tell me, Ethan." He looked at her, torn between fear and longing. At last his voice broke free, low and unsteady. "I love you. I love you more than my duty, more than my own life. Every moment I stand near you, I battle with myself, because I know I am not worthy of you. But I cannot kill this feeling. It burns inside me, no matter how much I try to bury it." Claire's breath caught. The words she had longed to hear now filled the night air. She felt her heart race, not with fear, but with a strange kind of freedom. "You think you are not worthy," she said softly, "but no man has ever shown me such truth. No noble, no prince, no suitor has ever spoken words that cut me so deeply." Ethan's hands shook at his sides. "If the council knew, they would cast me out. If the king knew, he would call me a traitor. I cannot give you a throne, Claire. I can only give you myself." She stepped closer, so close that the faint light of the stars touched them both. "That is all I want," she whispered. "Power, not crowns, just truth." For a long moment, the world was silent. Ethan stood frozen, the weight of duty battling the fire in his heart. But then Claire reached for his hand. His breath caught as her fingers touched his, soft and steady, a gesture he never thought he would feel. He did not pull away. "The council will not accept this," Ethan said, his voice rough. "They will try to bind you to another." "Let them try," Claire replied, her eyes steady. "They cannot command my heart." Ethan looked into her gaze and saw no fear, only determination. The princess, who had always followed duty now, stood before him with resolve sharper than steel. He felt his own fear begin to fade, replaced by something stronger, something unshakable. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to hope. He held her hand as the night wrapped around them, knowing that the path ahead would be filled with storms. But But he also knew that she had chosen to stand beside him. And in that moment, the soldier and the princess were no longer divided by rank or duty, but joined by the truth they could no longer deny. The morning sun rose over the palace, casting golden light across the gardens. The council had gathered once more, their voices sharp and full of demands. They spoke of alliances, of the need for Claire to wed a prince from a distant land. They promised her strength, wealth, and protection, but none of their words touched her heart. She listened in silence, her hands folded, her face calm. But inside, she carried the weight of the choice she had already made. Ethan stood outside the chamber, guarding the entrance as ordered. His wounds had healed enough for him to resume full duty, though the memories of the attack still lingered. He kept his posture straight, his expression firm, but his thoughts were restless. He had bared his soul to Claire under the stars, and she had not turned away. Yet he did not know what she would do now. She was a princess, bound by duty, and he was only a soldier. When the council ended, Claire rose with quiet dignity. The advisors bowed, but their eyes watched her with suspicion, waiting to see if she would bend to their plans. She left the chamber and walked through the long halls, her gown brushing softly against the floor. Ethan followed at a distance, his duty as her guard unshaken. She led him to the royal gardens, where the air was fresh and the flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Once they were alone, Claire turned to face him. Her eyes held a fire he had never seen before, steady and unbreakable. Ethan lowered his gaze, ready to bow, but her voice stopped him. "Look at me," she said. He lifted his head slowly, his chest tightening. The silence stretched between them until Claire stepped closer. "The council believes they own my future," she said. "I think they can place me where they wish, bind me like a piece of land or gold, but they are wrong. My heart is mine." Ethan swallowed hard. "Princess, if anyone heard you say this, let them hear," Claire interrupted. "I will not hide." She paused, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "The night you confessed your love, you believed it was a burden. But it was not. It was the first truth anyone has ever given me." Ethan's breath caught, his heart pounding. "Claire." She stepped even closer, so near that he could see the determination burning in her eyes. "You once whispered that you wished you could marry me. I heard it, and I kept it in my heart. Now I give you my answer." She held his gaze, her voice steady and clear. "My answer is yes." Ethan stood frozen, unable to believe what he had just heard. The world seemed to fall silent, the garden holding its breath. Joy rushed through him, fierce and overwhelming, yet he struggled to find words. "You mean?" "I mean," Claire said, her lips curving into a faint but certain smile, "that I choose you, not a prince, not a noble, not an alliance, you." His knees weakened, and for a moment he thought he might fall. He had faced death without fear, but now, standing before her, he trembled. "I am only a soldier," he whispered. "You are more than that," Claire said firmly. "You're the man who stood between me and death. The man who spoke truth when others only spoke lies. The man I trust with my life and my heart. No title, no crown, no council can take that from us." Ethan's eyes burned as he finally let himself believe. He reached out, his hand trembling, and Claire took it without hesitation. The touch was simple, but it bound them more strongly than any vow. For the first time, he felt not like a guard watching from the shadows, but like a man standing beside the woman he loved. In the days that followed, whispers spread through the palace. Nobles frowned, advisors raged, and the council fought to change her mind. But Claire stood firm, her decision unshaken. She walked with Ethan at her side, no longer hiding what bound them. The people saw and cheered, for they knew courage when they saw it, and their princess had chosen with her heart. Ethan and Claire stood together in the gardens once more, the same place where she had spoken her answer. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges and battles they would face. But as they looked into each other's eyes, they knew they had already won the greatest battle of all. They had chosen love, and nothing could take that victory away.